gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. And this week, we're talking about B2B marketing lessons from the Scuffed podcast and how to build a community. So every single CMO I know is trying to figure out how to build a community or make their community better. And most of the time as marketers, we're pretty bad at this, or we have no idea where to start. And so lots of times this falls on the content marketer. Sometimes that person is even titled like the head of content and community or something like that. And so what we wanted to do for this episode is look outside the B2B world, of course, and look at a shining example from there. Now, obviously, there's tons of examples of great communities. And since the World Cup is just around the corner, we wanted to bring you a young, thriving, and dedicated community of United States soccer fans.
We're getting pretty good at when we have a listener, making them so loyal. You know, we tend to like inspire some loyalty in the listener that they are willing to pay us money every month. So I think our percentage of like listener to patron is really good.
So in today's episode, we're going to chat with Adam Bells, the founder of Scuffed. And this is a special episode of Remarkable because we're going to be publishing the interview in full. You might not know of Scuffed. In fact, you might not be a soccer fan at all. But I think that this is a great example for B2B marketers. Scuffed is a fan-created niche community of the U.S. men's national soccer team. It started with Adam Bells posting videos on the internet, then a podcast, then a newsletter, a Discord, Patreon, there's event meetups, and there's loads and loads of user-generated content shared both externally on places like Twitter and otherwise, and on social media, and then also internally on the channel. Now, I'm biased because I'm a patron and a member of the community, but anytime you can find a place where people actually pay to be part of your community, I think that it is a perfect way to try to replicate some of the lessons that they have made and the mistakes that they've made and all that sort of stuff that we can engage with. I think foundationally, it has very good structure for a community with multiple entry points. Members can opt into the engagement however they wish. And I want to be clear that content does not equal community. So content, I think, is a push motion, a one-to-many motion, whereas community is many-to-many. So content is critical to building a community, to spread ideas, to foster conversations. But if you're just pushing content and that's it, that's not really a community. And I think a lot of B2B organizations get that wrong. They say, well, we have a podcast, or we have video series, or we have an event series, and like, that's our community. Well, that's not really the case. And before we get into our interview, we want to give you some of the takeaways ahead of time so you can sort of listen to the conversation with knowing that there's some lessons in here ahead. So here's our B2B lessons from the Scuffed community. Number one is be genuine. So it's not exactly a stated goal of the podcast, but when they started, the U.S. men's national team did not make the World Cup in 2018. And I would say one of the unofficial goals of the organization was to make the World Cup in 2022. And whatever way that community can be part of that. And we get into that in the episode. Number two is to be consistent. When you publish content, you want to do it at a regular cadence with similar formats, and then you can add in new formats and be very purposeful about how you do that. So if you listen to Bells, he talks about how they have a Monday review episode, how they have episode recaps, they have historic game recaps, they have more tactical breakdowns, and each of those types of content serve a very different purpose. Number three is be edutaining. So this is the classic keep them laughing, keep them learning. You should have a mix of timely reactionary content. And so they do this really well on the Discord when there's a soccer game that is playing, that everyone will pile into like one channel and be commenting about that particular match. And then they also do this with things like when the roster drops, then they're going to have either a live episode or something where people can call in and communicate that way, similar to the way that, radio has done that for a long time. And then also the on-demand evergreen content. They do Monday reviews, which are really interesting, like in that moment in time on a Monday, hey, how did the entire U.S. men's national team pool do in their games in Europe and America and other places? And then these historic game recaps to look back at past teams, and maybe we can sort of live in this nostalgia a little bit there too. Number 4, be responsive. So you need moderators and you need senior leaders in your organization to be engaged with the community. You can't just hope that people are going to be engaged. They're going to take cues from the leaders. If they're not engaged, then why should they be there? And also you get a little bit of like when there's the loudest voice in the room or the person who publishes the most, that kind of ends up making the community. So if that's not being moderated in some way, it's going to be really, really challenging. And Scuffed has, I think, done this really well, and they constantly try to do a better job at this. And number 5, that you have to layer the engagement. And really what layering the engagement means is you have to be okay with people opting into however they want to engage. And I think that a key part of this is you got to embrace the lurkers. Like in marketing, we hate lurkers. We hate people who are not quote unquote engaging. People who like just listen and don't comment or don't click around on stuff or whatever it is. In a community, that's totally fine. If all the people do is read your newsletter and they don't listen to your show, that's fine. If all they do is comment and post in the Discord and they don't listen to the podcast, that's fine. If all they do is go into in-person events, and that's the only way that they engage, that's fine. People are going to opt into however they want to, and that's a good thing. And that's something that I think we try to shepherd people in one way or another, oftentimes in B2B marketing, rather than just like creating the places where those people want to do their own thing. And people are going to do their own thing. And some people like short videos, some people like long podcast episodes, some people like to be in chat rooms, but ultimately you have to layer those engagements and create multiple places where they can do that. And I think a lot of people get that wrong. So anyways, that's it. Enough of me talking. Let's get to Adam Bells and the Scuffed community. Today, I'm joined by a special guest. Adam, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining the show. As I was telling you off air, I'm a huge fan of Scuffed, huge fan of the men's national team in soccer and the women's team for soccer. And I've been a patron for a while. And I wanted to chat with you about building a community, because I think what you have done with Scuffed, with both the podcast, the patron-only podcast, your Patreon, your Discord, all that stuff has been just such a clinic. You're very clinical in the way that you build a community. So I want to talk to you about that, but I'm curious, how'd you get started? Why'd you start this thing in the first place?
Started getting obsessed with the future of the men's national team right before we didn't qualify for the World Cup, and was watching a lot of soccer and spending a lot of time on Reddit, actually, talking about it with people on Reddit. I was spending enough time that I felt like I had to have some output from it. So I started a newsletter, wrote a newsletter about the national team and players who could play for it someday, and got on Twitter and started listening to more podcasts and thought, we could do this, or I could do this. I bet Greg could do this. A lot of people who are fans of the national team, they have like 1 or 2 friends that they text with about it, or, maybe one person in real life that they see that they can talk about it with. That was Greg for me, Greg Velasquez, my co-founder. And I was like, Greg, do you want to try to make a podcast? And he said, he was very reluctant. And I said, let me test it out with some other people. So I tried it, a couple like pilot episodes with a guy I met on Twitter. They went fine. I think Greg saw that it wasn't going to be that hard. And we started, that was in 2018, we started recording episodes pretty much once a week, and have been doing that ever since, with an increasing output over time.
And so what was your background? How did you think you were capable enough to write a blog and to do all that stuff?
Well, I was a newspaper reporter for 14 years and was through the first, 2.5 years of the podcast too. I worked for the Cedar Rapids Gazette, Des Moines Register, and then the Minneapolis Star Tribune, just as like a regular, cops, reporter, local government, local business. Did all that kind of stuff for 14 years. So I knew I could write, and the podcast is pretty reliant. My output in the podcast is pretty reliant on my writing too.
And so when you were kind of starting this as sort of the passion project and kind of wanting to make this, you kind of mentioned that there was no one really doing this, and you kind of wanted to plant your flag a little bit, but like, what was the short-term, medium term, long term goals?
Man, I don't know that it was all that ambitious. I wanted to make the podcast. I wanted to build the audience, but I didn't have, most of the time I didn't think it was going to be a full-time job ever. And that only started to become even possible in my mind, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. So I don't know. I don't have a great answer. I don't know that I had an end goal, really.
And in those like early years, years, I mean, it's not been 20, but in the early time when you started, maybe after the first, 50 episodes or so, probably feel like you're getting your footing a little bit, kind of know that stuff, building a little bit of an audience. When did you sort of start looking at this and say like, there's a real audience here and an appetite for this stuff? And obviously we had something pretty catastrophic happen in 2019. So I'd imagine that was probably a bit of a crucible moment as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that, we started when the men's national team was at its absolute nadir, and it was very low at the time. And so the people who were interested in our podcast early on are the real like sickos, like the core of the fan base would be the people who would start listening to a podcast about a national team that had just failed to qualify for the World Cup, which was still coming up when we started recording. That 2018 World Cup was still a few months away. So I don't know what that means for us as a podcast necessarily, but those were people who, that's the intense core of the fan base.
You could make an argument that you maybe started at the bottom of the parabola, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think makes a good community?
I think the tone of the community is probably, at least an online community like we have, is pretty important. Some kind of focus. I mean, you're not going to have a community unless you have some kind of focus. So maybe that's redundant. I don't know. What do you think makes a good community?
I think there has to be something very unique, like a common interest, and then a common willingness to have sort of a depth in addition to like both a horizontal and a vertical sort of like depth to it, where you can go super far in or you can stay at surface level, but there's sort of like layers to the engagement. Have you ever read the book Starfish and the Spider by chance? The thesis of this book is basically that there's two types of organizations. There's centralized and decentralized. And so centralized organizations are like managed top down. So, the United States or whatever, men's national team. Decentralized are like things like Alcoholics Anonymous, or like they use Al Qaeda as an example, or things like that, where you have like, there's no central leader. So you can't kind of like cut the head off. That it's like when you attack a decentralized organization, like it spreads, like, people go into wherever they're going. And then a centralized organization is like very top down sort of approach. And so I think that like a good community is kind of has a good blend of like centralized and decentralized, where it's like you have this sort of like founding team or leading members or people that are going to like set the agenda for everyone and set the tone and set the rules and all of that sort of stuff. And then they can either continue to participate or they can back away. And then sort of the community sort of, again, like finds its different sort of pieces there. So anyways, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that when I think of community, like outside of the context of, making a podcast, I think of old kinds of communities, like rural farming communities, or, like urban communities where people are like living together and suffering together and, sacrificing for each other in certain ways, or like faith communities, stuff like that. And so it's like, I don't know how to relate that to like a Discord server, like, I don't know what the connection is between those two things, because they're both technically a community, but I don't know how when you're living online with people, how do you suffer with them or sacrifice for them? Do we even know how to do that yet as humans?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that, I feel like we've suffered together on the Discord, like when Gio Reyna goes down, that second hamstring, like, I mean, listening to the podcast that morning is brutal, right? It's like, or you talked about, the lowest point of like not qualifying for World Cup and starting out in this moment. And perhaps like that is maybe a key element if you were to look back at this, that like starting off at that lowest moment and then just building momentum from now till, from then till now, that it's like kind of the community feels the sense of purpose, that it's like our job in part is to get this United States national team to the World Cup. And we did that. And then the next step is like, okay, we need to, get out of the group. And then the next step is we need to win the World Cup. So I don't know if there's a shared purpose there, but like, I would say that, don't you think that the people in the Scuffed, Discord and the broader community kind of feel a little bit responsible for some of the success?
Well, we definitely feel like it's our success. We've been rooting so hard for it that it feels like ours as well. Yeah. And I think you're right. We have suffered together and probably will suffer together more over the years. But I guess the other part is that the sacrificing for each other, the caring for each other is like, I'm not sure how to do that exactly in a community. And I'm not sure, I think we're all kind of trying to, in different ways, feel our way towards that, because the Discord, as you probably know, has, it has like a life of its own. It's the decentralized part of the, there is, I think everybody agrees that Greg and Jordan and I are in charge, but we're not really that interested in being in charge. We don't want to be telling people what to do all the time. So things just kind of take on a life of their own. And yeah, it's a fascinating thing, that all these people from all over the country who don't know each other spend so much time together,
So let's run down like, what are the Scuffed, like, I don't want to call them assets because that feels a bit strange, but like, what do you have that is at your sort of disposal right now?
The assets are all human, really. I do a lot of the hustle and a lot of the dirty work, but like, I think Greg is probably the best, like, pure analyst of the men's national team soccer. That, he's up there. He's right up there. To me, he's probably the best. I'm biased, of course, but I think the quality of his and precision of how he talks about soccer is really unique and kind of the core of Scuffed. We have, like you said earlier, Waukee, I think off air, Waukee and Vince are, I think, also really sort of singular people. And there aren't a lot like that out there, and incredibly entertaining to me, at least. So those are the big assets.
We talk about, like, in our shows about, you have to have someone who's like either playing at the 401 level constantly, and then, or you have someone who's playing at the 101 level that's like the audience's avatar for, like, I don't know, what's going on. I think you all clearly have sort of you're not a 101 person, but like you make it so that people understand that stuff. And obviously many of those questions you have yourself. Greg is 401. And then, Vince and Waukee are almost sort of like beat writers in their own way of the, Waukee's beat is the esoteric and Vince's beat is
he's got a little bit of the everyman too, because he's like he's grew up in American sports mostly, and came to soccer later in his life. But he understands sports. He understands athletes, and I think he's also quite funny too.
They're both absolutely hilarious. The three of you are hilarious. And then Greg, it's like Uncle Greg comes on, and then it's like talks to everyone.
Yeah.
So what I kind of wanted to run down. So you have the website, you have the podcast feed, the like RSS feed for your primary podcast.
That's right. Yeah.
You have the patron only RSS feed. You have your Patreon, which you can basically communicate with your folks, with your patrons. And then you have a newsletter, like an email newsletter.
Which is now defunct.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We said we're going to shelve it. We shelved it probably permanently, but maybe we'll bring it back. I don't know. Back in February, something like that. Maybe April.
And then obviously the Discord channel. And then all of you have Twitter feeds, So I'm curious, like, when you started building the community, we don't need to like get into like follower counts back then, but like, how known were you and Greg to the world of like the broader soccer community?
Not very. I started the Twitter account at the end of 2017, the Scuffed one. And, I have like a I have an Adam Bell's Twitter account that I used for like my newspaper work. That's out there too, but I've kept them totally separate. And, you know, we had probably 100 followers in October 2017 on the Scuffed Twitter account. And that was the main avenue of growth, I think, for like getting our name out there, was the Twitter account early. And I have to say, Daryl Grove, the late former host of Total Soccer Show, he was an early sort of fan's not the right word, but an early appreciator of what we were doing. And he encouraged us and helped us. He had me on the TSS a couple times. And, that was a big bounce for us, you know, when Daryl would like retweet a video that I made. I used to make all touches videos. I don't know if you remember those, but I mean, I preceded Sanjeev, you know, the USMNT videos. And, I was making like all touch videos of Jonathan Gonzalez at Monterrey. And, those would get retweeted by Daryl. That was a big part of growing the audience, actually, was that sort of legally dubious, in terms of copyright law, use of soccer video to sort of promote the brand. But I enjoyed doing that stuff. And I think the people who do it nowadays and put those videos on Twitter, they enjoy it too. But it does help you grow your audience pretty fast.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that, like, you know, you'd say that this is like quote unquote like organic marketing that sort of got you there. But again, that's still stuff and content. You're basically like saying, hey, nobody is making, you know, whatever, these type of videos anywhere on the internet, or if they are, they're not publicly, you know, available. We're going to make these. And when they get shared, that when they point back to something, hey, you can listen to our podcast.
I mean, there's no two ways about it. That was a big part of the early growth of the numbers. Certainly it grew the Twitter account, follower count, and that helped the podcast reach a broader audience. And for a while, I didn't focus. Should we answer the question about assets? I think you got them all. Like the Patreon. I don't know what your experience with it is, but to me, it's not the best way to communicate with the audience or with the community. That's why Discord is so nice, because it is pretty slick for that. The issue is not everybody on Patreon uses the Discord. Actually, a lot of people don't. You know, it's a robust community, but it's not even 25% use it in a typical week. You know what I mean?
And this is, yeah, we can kind of get into like levels and stuff like that. But the way that I think about content and community, how they pair is like content is all push. It's a push activity. The other side of community is about engagement. So it's like, how are you responding to people? How are you, like, you know, if you want to build a Twitter page, like I'm sure that you were liking and commenting and all that stuff a ton, not just posting. And that's like people.
Yeah, I responded to everybody in the early days. It was fun, you know? Not anymore.
That's awesome.
On Twitter. I respond to everybody. I try to respond every time a patron has a question. I think I do respond every time.
Yeah, you're super, super responsive. So when did you start like building out a newsletter? Did that matter to you? Was that a priority? Were you using like some marketing technology? Like how'd that go?
I had some help from a couple people in the Discord. Shout out Coach Beard and MJM Matt. And then Waki was helping me with it for a while. He would write a section of it. What was the idea behind it? I think it was to sort of leverage the Discord and some of the funny stuff that people were saying in there. So that was a section of the newsletter we created. Were
you sending that through Patreon, or did you have a separate email provider?
I was actually using Substack.
Substack. That's right. Substack.
Yeah.
Got it.
But it was just a free Substack.
Yeah.
There was no subscription. I don't know. It just seemed like after a while, we were putting, you know, I was putting like half a day's work into a week into it. I didn't think it was that great.
But it's interesting that you said that, like, you know, you generally, you're only communicating with probably 25% of your people on the Discord. I wonder what percentage you're communicating via the podcast. Like how many of your community, you know, if your community is a 100%, how many listen to the show versus, you know, comment on Discord versus we're opening emails or Patreon emails?
Boy, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, certainly the episodes in the public feed are reaching a much larger audience than even the patron only episodes. But I think probably for the patron only episodes, that the podcast itself may be the best way to reach people, because my sense of it now is, and this isn't science, this is just kind of me watching the emails come in when people sign up, is that the Monday Review is the primary driver of subscriptions on Patreon. Like, without a doubt, it is the primary driver. So I think people sign up for those Monday reviews. If I say something in the Monday Review, they're probably gonna hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's probably your flagship asset. How did you decide to gate that? And I know that this is just like a moment in time, but
yeah. Well, it was suggested to me by a patron named Jonathan Sanders, who just has he's a smart guy who has some sense of how other podcasts operate and of like online marketing. And he had given me some good advice about some other stuff. And he said, you gotta do this. This is a West Ham podcast I listen to does this. And, I'm like more than happy to pay for it. And, I was like, okay, we tried it, and immediately subscriptions shot up. Like, it was just an easy, excellent idea from Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan.
And so take me back, like right before that moment in time where you had this community, you had the Discord. Were you thinking about going ad supported? Were you thinking about going just like, hey, we're just going to keep serving this community and do this Patreon thing, and then just try to figure out how to make this thing a real live thing?
The few experience I have had, booking ads and then reading them on the podcast were it just seemed like way more trouble than they were worth. And so because of laziness, I prefer the patron method. But, it's not just like small time creators like us who are following that model. It's like the New York Times basically is moving to the subscription model. I think it's a really good way to do it. And so I never really, as not before the Monday Review, certainly by the time we were doing the Monday Review, I had no interest in doing ads. And it's just kind of a weird little thing we can brag about. We're an ad-free podcast, Yeah, I just like the simplicity of the patron model. It's certainly like the size of our podcast, it's very manageable. We have something just over 1,500 patrons right now. That's not like, I'm one guy and there are like 3 other guys, 5 if you count Jordan, the Discord moderator. We can handle a 1,500 person community, I think. So I love the model.
You mentioned sort of you have, people that are content, your team that creates, you, Greg, Vince, and Waki. You have Jordan who moderates the community. Do you ever sort of like, I don't know how professional you get with this stuff, but do you ever kind of say like, hey, these are our sort of roles and responsibilities. You're supposed to comment this much in the Discord. It seems like everybody just kind of gets in where they fit in. But there's a lot of posting from sort of the core team.
Yeah, Vince is in there all the time. Greg's in there a lot. I'm in there pretty regularly. Waki's not usually in there, but that's fine. There's no requirements, and he is in there sometimes. So. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty fly by night operation when it comes to like roles and responsibilities. It's all just sort of understood. And I would say the Monday Review has required much more like planning, and there's more thought that goes into that, I think, than
that's the mystique
on a consistent basis than any of the other episodes. And we have to work out what time we're going to record and stuff, but not too formal.
I would say that you have, I mean, if you look at like, I think, by the way, now that I think about it, I think I found out about you from TSS. I think it was the Scuffed TSS crossover. That's how I think I found Scuffed.
Is that right?
But yeah, I think so. But I also might have seen you on Twitter though, as well. But I think that's how I saw it. And I was like, oh shit, this is awesome.
A lot of people found us because of TSS, for sure. I say Daryl Grove is the godfather of the Scuffed podcast, and it's true.
which is an interesting kind of note in terms of marketing. Podcasts are always a great place to to find more podcast content. That's interesting that you'd see a pop from stuff like that, and then now you see a pop in patrons from the Ungated Monday Review episodes. Really speaks to like this community is much, much bigger, and people are looking for this one thing. How do you differentiate?
I don't know. I feel like our approach and our personalities are just kind of what they are, and it's gonna be different than most of what's out there. I think a lot of the original ideas, a lot of like the great turns of phrase that we have used over the years do come from Greg, like the striker hat or, I can't think of anything else right off the top of my head, but there's been a lot of stuff. And I think Greg makes it unique just automatically by speaking on the podcast. And, I don't know, but if you go around and listen to a lot of the other stuff, a lot of us are saying the same thing, saying the same things, It's like, it's not that. Everybody's starting 11 is roughly the same. And, I don't know.
What is now?
Yeah.
I think that if you were to go back a year ago, though, like it was totally different. I think if we were to look at like the men's team right this second, like we've just had a very, whatever. But like when we were down, what is it? Was it down 1-0 to Honduras? I remember I was sitting watching my friend. I was like, this is over. Like the team is over. Like everything is going to regress back. So I think that there were moments in time where
that's true.
It's the peacetime president versus the wartime president, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to be the peacetime president. It's like, hey, we have all these young players and everyone's abroad. It's easy to do a Yanks abroad when there's a bunch of Yanks abroad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's another thing. That's one of the basic things that makes the Monday Review successful is there is so much to talk about each weekend. It's hard to keep track of it all. It is nice to get it all in one place. So that's like it's funny and everything, but it's also like, hopefully for people who want to know how our player pool did over the weekend, it's a good place to go and get updated,
How do you like mediate interactions among members? Like how do you mediate negative behavior? How do you incentivize positive behavior? Does that stuff sort itself out? There's a lot of conversations going at any given time.
Yeah, that's been, we have not figured out how to do that. We have had some problems, and we're figuring out how to do a better job of handling them. It's very sensitive stuff, it's like, and it's very subtle, but I think generally, if someone's obviously being a jerk, then, it's pretty easy for Jordan to warn them, and then that usually solves it. It's the more subtle, it's like the subtler stuff that happens over a long period of time that is harder to mediate, and we haven't quite figured it out.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet. I think that you kind of have done a great job of just vibes check, of just like, hey, are you being a bummer right now or not? And I think that keeps it light and fun when people are kind of getting negative, and people are super passionate. Like it's a feature, not a bug, right? If it was a super boring channel where nobody ever had any opinions, like nobody would be there.
Yeah, we have a thread off a channel called Bad Vibes Only. So if somebody's saying something that doesn't feel right in the moment, you can just respond with hashtag Bad Vibes Only. Take it to Bad Vibes Only, buddy.
That was me at halftime or I think it's Honduras.
Everybody was Bad Vibes Only at halftime at Honduras.
That was the worst. So we missed an asset, and I'm remiss. So in-person events.
Oh yeah.
You've done in-person events. Tell me about that.
Yeah, those were really wonderful because it's still, even though you're enjoying typing on a computer with somebody or tapping on your phone with somebody, it's totally different to be there with someone in the flesh, watch the U.S. win. So I would say we did events in we tried Columbus. It didn't really work, but we did a big tailgate in Nashville when we played Canada. we did a big tailgate in Cincinnati in the parking lot of a Catholic church when we played Mexico there and beat them 2-0. Tried to do Columbus, and then we did Orlando when we qualified against Panama. And those were both wonderful days, the one in Cincinnati and the one in Panama, and the one in Nashville too, even though it was kind of an uninspiring 1-1 draw, if you remember. But Cincinnati, everybody's had some alcohol, having a good time, and you come back from the stadium and we just put a hurting on Mexico. We beat them 2-0. We controlled the game, outside of a couple of chances early for Mexico. And so, man, it felt good. It felt like the sort of the consummation of all the promise that the program has had for the last few years to just hand it to Mexico in a World Cup qualifier in front of like an electric crowd in Cincinnati. And, we all came back there. We sang "Oh John Luca" all together. There were probably like 20 of us, and it's totally dorky, but it was like, felt so good to be all together. So that those in-person events have been great. The thing is, they're not great for making a podcast. If I go and spend all day, it takes a little bit of work to get that all set up and like coordinate everything, kind of make sure it's sailing off into the sunset before, a couple hours before the game, so I can have a few beers and, enjoy myself. By the time all of that is over, it's like you're really tired and I'm not going to do a podcast that night. So you got to do the podcast the next day. Oftentimes I'm driving to that place with all the gear for the tailgate. Got to drive back. So I've done both of those big game recaps from the road, the Cincinnati one and the Orlando one against Panama. I did them from the car in a parking lot somewhere, which is fine. It turns out okay. But my voice is all hoarse. So I got to figure out how to handle like do the in-person event, but also like be able to podcast well the next day. But yeah, I think those have really strengthened the community. People being able to see each other, and now they know that this person in person, and now they know this person in real life that they're talking to on the internet. It's definitely like a gluey kind of thing.
Like you said, it brings everybody together and it strengthens. Now there's sort of like another core group where it's like, these are all the people who met in person. And so like, if all these people are going to have each other's backs, if, the newcomers that come in, that join that become patrons tomorrow, that join the Discord, tomorrow, there's a group of people who have been there, done that, and sort of know how things are done, and people can kind of fall in on that group, it seems like.
That's exactly how it works out. Yeah. That's the core of the Discord is the people. I mean, there are other people who weren't there in person who are really, prominent in the Discord. But I'd say, at least in my mind, the core is the people who have been at the tailgates and are also active in the Discord. And they have there's a bond there, I think, for sure, that allows other people to sort of build around it.
I'm curious, like just from a content creation perspective, it seems like you're kind of getting to that point where, and I know you've done a couple like live things too, which I know that like Spaces is kind of weird. And there's, I know there's a lot of, all that area is kind of very fuzzy, but it seems like you've kind of got a really good mix of on demand, content where you're super consistent, you have super high quality. Like you said, you edit, which like for an amateur podcast in the early days to what it is now, like consistency, repeatability, format, structure, these are like all the things that we at Caspian like preach to people is like, you make a promise to the listener and you need to deliver that promise every single episode. I think you all do a fantastic job of that. And like I said, you're diversifying your content portfolio now with kind of the show within a show. You have a stream that has kind of multiple different shows within that. Like, how do you think about like evolving it? Why did you decide to sort of go back and do these old recaps and stuff? Like, and how are you serving sort of the patrons with new stuff?
Yeah, I think repeatability, the word you said, repeatability is so crucial because you can have a good idea and maybe even execute it once well, but if it's not something you can just go back to and be able to do over and over again, it's not it's not something you can offer as a promise to the listener. Or in our case, anything new is going to be, I mean, any big new moves we make are going to be just for patrons, you know, like, so it's going to be a benefit that we're offering to people in exchange for money, fundamentally. So I'm always on the lookout for stuff that I'm like, I know we can do this. I know it's not going to take like 3 weeks to edit. And I think we can pull this off. Let's do it, you know? And that's what the historic recaps are. We have a lot of muscle memory doing a recap of a game. We have some muscle memory from the Monday review on just kind of like riffing on stuff. And I think the historic recaps are kind of a mix of those two things with, all four of us involved. So that just seemed, it doesn't, part of me is like, well, we should do, like a 6-part journalistic, like narrative series on XYZ. And then like, the time Thursday rolls around, I'm like, there's no way we're going to be able to pull that off. There's just impossible. So that just like hitting that Venn diagram of like achievable for us, but also useful to the listener and like something that they would enjoy. That's what's always in my mind, basically.
I love that. And I love that you have Monday review every Monday. We're coming at you if you're a patron. You have the game recaps. Then you have sort of like, kind of a state of the unions almost, where you and Greg sort of come on and just talk about, where things are at. I would posit the thing that I think would be really interesting, and take it or leave it, is like the deep dive on individual player, where they're at right now with their skill set, how they've evolved, and where do they need to go. Sort of like taking the FIFA card rating and kind of almost like diving into that and be like, where does Pulisic need to get better to become, X? Or where does, Gio Reyna, where is he really at right now? Where is Serginho like really at right now? Because we say that, oh, you need to get better, you need to be more clinical, or you need to be a better finisher, but that's not really like that actionable. It's like, oh, whatever, Anthony needs to work on his right foot, or, whatever.
Yeah. I like that idea. I'm writing it down.
And it makes me think about, and I just love stuff like this because I love here and now, keeping up with the Joneses, snapshot in time. You're giving people, where things are at right now. And then the historical recaps, bringing history back into it. And it's so cool, like listening to like Vince, for example, who's not a soccer fan back then, go back and watch this stuff with these fresh eyes. Like that stuff is just so cool to me. And it deepens the understanding of the game and the culture, and like why Claudio Reyna's son being on the team. And when you did the whole thing of like, he makes all the same moves that Claudio made, like that stuff is just like, you feel as a listener, like, holy shit, this is so rich. Like this is like 30 years of history that I'm listening to.
Yeah, that's cool that you say that. Yeah, I was just thinking about those today. Earlier while I was mowing the lawn, I was like, well, we got to find a way to make that connection between the past and the present more often on those pods. That's my goal for the next one, is really exploit those opportunities to connect it to the present.
Yeah, I love that. And connecting to like, okay, this person is kind of like this person's skill set, but whatever. Do you have like advice for people trying to start their own community? Like if you could do it all over again, what would you have done, keep doing, versus what would you have been like, I probably wouldn't have focused on that?
One thing we haven't really talked about yet, which I think has helped us over the years, is that we're not very calculated as when it comes to like building a community, or even we haven't been super calculated about like maximizing our reach, or, we're just kind of doing our thing. And I think people were attracted to that initially, so it wasn't like we're on YouTube and like just like smashing the view records and stuff. We're just like some guys making a podcast because they love soccer and they love the national team. And I don't know, I think that the chillness of it was appealing to people initially, and probably still is to some people. So I don't have a ton of good advice on how to build a community, because it sort of did just kind of happen. I mean, I hustle. I work hard at the podcast. I try to make the podcast as good as I can. And increasingly work harder. I'm trying to work harder on Twitter and, more effectively to actually make good tweets that get retweeted. And it sounds really simple, but for a while I was kind of ignoring it. I was just like doing the bare minimum on Twitter. So yeah, once the community sort of coalesced in Discord, I think we were all kind of like, wow, this is cool. But I don't think anybody would say, well, we did this, so that's why it happened. I was like, I don't know.
I think that, if I were to go back in time, I'm really curious if you could have built an email newsletter that was, I'm biased to this because this is how I think most email newsletters should be, super short, of just like check-ins where we at on stuff of like, once a week. Like, I wonder if you had just done like a once a week, not a deep dive, but just like a short sort of like, thing each week and just build up that newsletter subscriber list. I wonder if launching the Patreon would have probably got you more of an initial push. But the opportunity cost on that is really tough because at the end of the day, your audio content is so stellar that it's like you kind of have to, it's tough to do both if you don't have more resources.
No, I think the newsletter is one example, but there are probably lots of ways we could, expand our reach. That's the thing. We're getting pretty good at when we have a listener, making them so loyal. We tend to like inspire some loyalty in the listener that they are willing to pay us money every month. So I think our percentage of like listener to patron is really good from what I can tell from Googling about that. But we're still a pretty small podcast. We don't have 50,000 listeners, not even close. So
that's why it's such an interesting case study for me to look at this stuff, because the winning formula for you isn't 100,000 listeners an episode. Because like ad supported, if you had 100,000 listeners an episode, you could make a shitload of money ad supported. But it's like when you're building a core niche audience, it's like you need to deliver on the promise consistently and build depth rather than like build horizontally. And I think that like that's what you all did so well, is like having different voices and varied content and different layers to the community that can, like, I hop on Discord and I'm just like, dude, this is like 5,000 messages. I'm like, I just need to like tap in, whatever. But it's like, but in the moment for all the people that are in there commenting in the leads game, like, I'm like, yeah, I'm watching on tape delay an hour later. So like, I'll just get caught up on that, later on. But again, that's how those people want to do certain things. So I love that. The other thing about user generated content that you mentioned is super fascinating. And I just want to touch on that real quick. So you were basically making all these videos at initial early days. That gets, some eyeballs. People are saying, oh, these are cool. You get in touch with Daryl, which is great. Then you get to this point where now more people are making those type of videos. Patrons are now actually making content. Like, how do you think about user generated content? Is this something that like can, be an asset, can grow the show? It's taken its life of its own. Like people making comps, people making even like derivative, like, podcasts or like spaces content, stuff like that, where people are talking about you all in their, whether they're doing a Twitter space or whether they're doing something else, or like referencing you on other shows and stuff like that. Like you're now creating stuff that other people are picking up, and people are creating it like for you in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think on the comps front, it's like, the guy who's been making a lot of comps lately, who's very active in the Discord, he's building his audience on Twitter. I think it's sort of like, he's not really, I mean, I know he's sort of creating it in some sort of relationship with Scuffed, but it's his creation, and it's his, if I want to use one of his videos, I just retweet him, if I want to put it out on my Twitter timeline. So I just try to treat that with respect instead of like, downloading the video and then like pretending it's mine. Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
But you're right. There is a lot of sort of like generated stuff, like memes and like photos, and people edit Photoshop photos and stuff. And we haven't mentioned this, but we have like a whole fleet of custom emojis in the Discord that some of them are really funny. So there's a ton of that sort of stuff being created. And it's great. It's awesome. I haven't quite figured out, what was the question exactly? How do I think about that stuff?
Yeah, just do you, as you think about that stuff and you just see all this stuff being created, like, is there a way to like use this to either grow the audience or grow your patrons, or maybe just add deeper engagement within the community? Like, how do you think about user-generated content, I guess? I
mean, I like having it so I posted a screenshot of a little bit of a discussion with the names, blocked out, from Discord onto Twitter.
I loved that
earlier today. And because it was just a perfect little encapsulation of the issue that I felt was coming from this other Twitter user. I think of it as useful, but, and then, some people have made, like, one of our Discord users made a video where he put podcast audio. So audio of, you mentioned it, the parabola, Vince and Waukee talking about the parabola theory about Josh Sargent, and this user on Discord, Nate, made just put it under a video of Josh Sargent scoring a brace last March or last January. So the podcast clip came from December. The game happened in January, so it was like prophetic that this was going to be well, obviously it didn't turn out to be a parabola situation back then, but that's fun to have somebody.
Maybe he was coming down at that
He was
point.
still, yeah, that's right. He was on the left side of the parabola. Mm-hmm. But Nate made a great video that I put out on Twitter that week, but I credited him, but I put it out because it was like a great advertisement for the podcast, for the Monday Review, to have Vince and Waukee saying this smart and funny stuff about Sargent under the video of him scoring the goals. And I actually stole that idea from Nate. I mean, I do that pretty much every Monday now. I use a little 20, 30 second clip from the Monday Review with some game footage, or, maybe Jesse Marsh shaking Tuchel's hand footage or not shaking it so much. And those are great promos for the Monday Review. Actually, they seem to work pretty well.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. The derivative content stuff is like, it's literally endless, because you're like, I could make 50 of these and to promote the show. And you're like, how much bandwidth do I have? Okay. Final question, I think, unless there's anything that we missed that you wanted to say. How do you deal with talent? Like, you bring on Vince, bring on Waukee. Obviously Greg is the star, but as you're the person who's running the ship here, like, how do you think about supporting talent? Because at the end of the day, like, there's one part where you want to control the energy, and the other part where you want to let them do all the things that they want to do.
Yeah, I mostly just let them do all the things that they want to do. I am kind of like, I don't know if you call me the showrunner or whatever, but I'm like the guy kind of in charge of where the show's going. But it always happens in consultation on the air, and then I just cut that out. It's like, should we have talked about? Should I have said that? That stuff happens. Or do we really want to keep talking about this? We usually quickly agree on how we're gonna proceed. But I think the main job for me is to make sure Waukee and Greg and Vince are happy and want to keep doing what we're doing, because I think it's working pretty well. So I think they are happy right now. So that's good.
Awesome. Anything else? Anything that we missed, or any other stuff? I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
No, I mean, the one thing, my dad was in development, or is in development. He's like he's in the fundraising world, raises money for nonprofits. He's done that his whole career. And I find, I have some like window into how that world works. And I feel like the Patreon subscriber membership sort of thing is a lot like that. There's a lot of similarities between like the hustle that he has to do to make sure he's getting in touch with people and letting them know that they're on his mind or whatever. Not on his mind so much as just like keeping in touch and making sure people aren't like drifting away is, I'm not saying I've mastered that part of Patreon at all, but I do think that's a part of it, staying in touch, communicating, making sure people know there's like an open door to ask you questions or bring you concerns. Cause I don't, when I lose like a $10 subscriber, $10 a month subscriber, that's a big deal to me. That's $120 a year. And, so sometimes I email people after they leave and I say, hey, did we do anything wrong? And, that's sort of like those boring little jobs of like checking in with people and stuff like that. That's a part of it that I didn't think I would be doing for a soccer podcast. But it's not so bad. And it really matters a lot, or even like the direct appeal. I can tell you this, we had, I can't remember the exact numbers, but a significant number of $2 subscribers that upgraded to $5 a month just because I asked them to. I just said, hey, if you can't do $5 a month, obviously we love that you're a patron at all, and no problem at all. That's great. Thank you. But if you're able, we would love for you to be a $5 subscriber. And, like more than 100 people upgraded off of that message, basically. Which is like, I wouldn't have thought that was part of the gig,
I think that's what's so interesting about the kind of comparison that you made there is, for me as a patron, for you and another show, like I literally just feel good supporting you. Like I think your podcast is literally one of the best ones out there, and I think it's the best soccer podcast. But I think like just supporting you makes me feel good because I know that it allows you all to create stuff, which is super different from like a YouTube creator, which still is beholden to their audience, but they have to have them consume. Whereas like if I don't listen to like the game recaps, you don't lose any money. I'm still just as happy. You're just as happy. Our relationship is unchanged. Whereas like if you were creating YouTube videos, if I'm busy, I have a 15-month-old, if I'm busy, I'm moving right now and I'm not watching all your videos, you're literally not making as much money off of me. And so I think that there's something interesting there. And perhaps there's like a hybrid model that you could even look at down the road or something where you are posting certain types of content to YouTube or whatever for that to have that sort of like, thing. But like you said, it's like, why do that when, whatever. The other side of that is a YouTube creator, when they want more money, they literally just post another video, right? So it's like, you don't have the pressure to do that, but you also can't just make more money by making more content. That's not really how it works. So it's just an interesting sort of, you really, like you said, you're so tied in, you're responding to everyone. And then you have Jordan moderating the Discord too, which is like, the customer experience is every single day with that, right? It's not just, hey, when you subscribe or when you leave, it's like every single day, there's still someone who's like moderating what's going on in the Discord, if that's how you do things. And from a consistency and a repeatability standpoint, you're delivering every week with Monday reviews.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Discord architecture is another sort of interesting area of all this. Like, how do you structure a Discord server to make it the best? We haven't quite, we've had some discussion about that on the Discord, how we're gonna make it a little bit cleaner before the World Cup. But everybody has a different opinion, and I don't know if you've read any classic texts on the matter. I'd be interested,
dude. I'm new to Discord. Because I think I'm older, so all of my stuff is on like Slack channels, like private Slack channels, and Discord's a little bit unruly at times.
It's pretty similar to Slack though, right? Like
it's basically the same exact thing. So our question is always like, when we talk with people about this stuff, the older, more business inclined folks are already on Slack anyways for work. So adding another Slack channel is a lot easier. Whereas like going to Discord is basically way more young people are on Discord, and it's like an app on your phone. I mean, Slack is an app on your phone too, but I have no idea how many like people on Discord are using the desktop version. So yeah, I think generationally, I think there's probably a little bit of friction there from those two. But yeah, no, it gets super unruly. I mean, how many channels do you all have? I mean, there must be 20 at least.
Okay, I've lost track. There's so many. Yeah.
But then you started doing 20, the threads though.
Yeah.
Which is
game
really
threads
interesting.
the game threads are slick. Yeah, those are a great way to experience a soccer game on TV. So it's a game thread that's just, it comes off a channel. It's dedicated purely to this one game. So, and it's a nice way to Discord. It's probably my favorite thing about in terms of the nuts and bolts of the user experience. It's those game threads. Probably my favorite thing about the Discord.
Yeah, it's the most utility, and then you can just go check in. The only thing that would be, it jumps you a little bit in the Discord sometimes. Like, so I think that they need some better functionality there. But I think that this speaks to like this on-demand, like you can check in with the Striker channel and go learn a bunch of stuff see what people are talking about strikers, or post something and get a response there. You can go in real time into a game thread and get exactly what's going on there. Like that's the stuff that it's like, man, when you have that paired with content that's like, push content paired with the in-person events, like you just have a very 360-degree relationship with the community. And I think that that's the magic that you all have at this moment in time, is like, it's very comprehensive and you can dig in super far, or you can just kind of stay at arm's length. And I think that that's like the beauty of it.
I'd never quite thought about it that way, but I think that's right. It definitely can go deep, but it's true. You can also kind of enjoy being just at the sort of surface level of it. I think it can be a nice experience too.
And it's better than Twitter. That's the other thing. Because you can like follow the discourse on Twitter, but it's so toxic at times that it's like you get a lot of negativity. If you go follow, hashtag Christian Pulisic on Twitter, like see you're going to get a million accounts talking about a million things. Whereas like if that happens on whatever, on one of the
Discord channels,
threads or something like that. Yeah, or a Discord channel. It's like you're going to have a much more nuanced approach to it, of people who are like a little bit more like-minded. Perhaps echo chamber, but that's all right.
Could be argued, yeah. But at least people are coming at it from the same point of view, or at least the same angle. Like they want Pulisic to succeed. They're trying to be, realistic about it, and they're not like, it's not like when you search Twitter, you could see a bunch of Chelsea fans who hate Pulisic's guts,
Yep.
So you're not going to get that on the Scuffed Discord.
No, you sure aren't.
You ain't.
Our golden boy. Adam, dude, this has been so awesome. A million notes and takeaways from this stuff. Any final thoughts?
No, it's helpful for me to think it through. And talk it through. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.